In November 2017, a beam of cosmic particles falling from space passed straight through the Great Pyramid of Giza and hit something that was not supposed to be there. A gap. An empty space the size of an airliner, sealed inside 4,000 years of solid stone, with no door, no corridor, and no known way in. It sits directly above the Grand Gallery, roughly 150 feet up, inside the largest stone monument ever built by human hands. And to this day, nobody has entered it. Nobody has seen the inside of it. Nobody can even agree on what it is. The scientists who found it did not use shovels. They did not drill a single hole or move a single block. They used muons, particles that rain down from the upper atmosphere at nearly the speed of light and pass through solid rock the way X-rays pass through skin. Every second, these particles are falling on your head, on the desert, on the pyramid, in the millions. Most sail straight through stone. But where there is more stone, fewer of them make it through. Where there is empty space, more of them arrive on the other side. Line up a detector, count the particles for months, and you can build a map of the inside of a solid object without ever touching it. It is the same technique used to peer inside volcanoes and to check the cores of damaged nuclear reactors. And someone, finally, aimed it at the largest stone building on the planet. What makes the result impossible to wave away is who confirmed it. This was not one lab with one machine that could have malfunctioned. 3 separate teams used 3 different types of muon detector. A group placed instruments inside the pyramid's chambers. Another setup in the Grand Gallery itself. A team from Nagoya University in Japan ran their own detectors from their own angles. France, Japan, and Egypt, working under a project called Scan Pyramids that began in 2015. And every one of them recorded the same thing in the same place. Not a crack, not a rumor, not a smudge in the data. A void at least 100 feet long, hidden in the heart of a structure we have been studying, mapping, and crawling through for 200 years. That is the part mainstream science admits happened. It was published in the journal Nature. It is real. But here is the question that void forces open. The one that has archaeologists, engineers, and physicists arguing in ways they would rather not do in public. If we could miss a chamber that large, that obvious, that close to passages tourists walk through every single day, what else is inside that pyramid? What else is underneath it? And why does every attempt to look deeper seem to end with a sealed door, a canceled permit, or an official telling everyone to calm down and move along? Because the void was only the beginning. There is a corridor they found 6 years later that nobody predicted. There is a shaft beneath the plateau that drops into black water and stops at a chamber no one can explain. And there is a claim, made in 2025, so large that if even a fraction of it is true, it would rewrite the story of who built these monuments and what they were actually for. We are going to walk through all of it. The evidence, the cover, and the explanation that survives when the fantasy burns away. And by the end, you will understand why the smartest people in the room go quiet when you ask them what is really under the Great Pyramid. Start with what the void actually is, because the official explanation is where the trouble begins. The Great Pyramid was built for the pharaoh Khufu, whose reign is placed around 2551 to 2528 BCE. It is the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. For most of modern history, we believed we had mapped its interior. 3 known spaces: the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and the Grand Gallery. That towering sloped corridor with its corbelled walls climbing up into darkness. That was the map. That was the whole story. Then the muons arrived and put a hole in it. The mainstream reads the void as a relief chamber, a construction feature. The theory goes that the builders left hollow spaces above the Grand Gallery to take pressure off the roof, to keep the millions of tons of stone above from crushing the passage below. It is a reasonable idea. We know the Egyptians did exactly this above the King's Chamber. where they stacked 5 separate compartments of granite specifically to distribute the load. So a stress void is not crazy, it fits what we know. But that explanation has a problem. The relief chambers above the king's chamber are cramped, rough, purely functional spaces. Crawl spaces, really. Rough-hewn granite stacked to spread a load with no finish and no ambition. You would never mistake them for anything grand. The big void is different. When the teams went back and ran fresh scans with new detectors placed at new angles, they re-estimated one single section of it at 40 meters long. That is, over 130 feet. That is not a gap left between two badly fitted blocks. That is a space with real dimensions, a real slope that the researchers are still arguing about, and a real shape sitting in a part of the pyramid where the builders had no obvious structural reason to leave that much emptiness. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. It runs roughly parallel to the Grand Gallery below it. The Grand Gallery is one of the most striking spaces ever built in the ancient world. A vaulted corridor climbing at a steep angle, walls stepping inward as they rise, a ceiling nearly 30 feet overhead. It is a masterpiece, and directly above it, the void appears to echo its length and its line, almost like a reflection. A second gallery, a twin, hidden and sealed, that no human being has walked through in 4,500 years. If the builders went to the trouble of creating a space that large, that carefully placed, mirroring their finest interior corridor, the idea that it is just an accidental byproduct of construction starts to feel very thin. Here is where it gets stranger. The teams could detect the void. They could measure it. They could argue about its slope. What they could not do was reach it. There is no passage connecting it to any chamber we know. No door, no shaft, no corridor leading in from the Grand Gallery a few meters below. Whoever built that space did not want anyone getting to it, and they succeeded so completely that the most advanced non-destructive imaging on Earth can see the room but cannot find the way in. And that raises the obvious question, the one the polite version of archaeology would rather not sit with. Why hide a stress relief cavity? Think about it. If the void is purely structural, purely functional, a hollow left to take weight off the roof, then there is nothing to protect and nothing to conceal. You would not seal it behind solid stone, with no access at all. You would not bother. You seal something for one of two reasons. Either you are protecting it, keeping it safe from the weight and the ages and the intruders, or you are hiding it, making sure no one who comes after you ever gets in. Neither of those reasons fits a simple empty gap. Both of them fit something the builders considered important enough to wall off forever. That is the first clue, and it is the easiest one to see because it is inside the pyramid, confirmed, measured, published. Now we get to the one that came later, the one that arrived with tool marks. In March 2023, the same team announced they had confirmed a second hidden space. This one sits behind the north face of the pyramid, tucked above the original entrance, behind a strange arrangement of massive limestone blocks arranged in an upside-down V that engineers call the Chevron. For decades, people had stared at that chevron and wondered why it was there. Why build a giant stone shield into the face of a pyramid at that exact spot if there was nothing behind it? The answer, when it came, was a corridor. 9 meters long, around 2 meters wide, vaulted ceiling, a finished, deliberate, hidden passage that had been sitting behind that stone shield for 4,500 years. They confirmed it 3 separate ways because a single method is easy to dismiss. They used muon radiography, the cosmic particle scan. They used ground-penetrating radar, radio waves fired into the stone that bounce back differently off empty air than off solid rock. They used ultrasonic testing, high-frequency sound waves that do the same job with vibration instead of radio. 3 different physics principles, 3 different machines, 3 different ways of being wrong, and all 3 landed on the same answer. The corridor was real, and it was exactly where the scan said it would be. Then they did the thing that turns a measurement into proof. They threaded a tiny endoscope camera through a narrow gap between the Chevron blocks, pushed it into the dark, and looked, and they saw it with their own eyes. A finished, empty, sealed hallway with a vaulted ceiling, running back into the pyramid, going nowhere anyone could reach. Sit with what that means for a second. That corridor sits directly above the original entrance to the Great Pyramid, the spot millions of visitors have photographed. It was behind a giant, deliberate stone feature that people had puzzled over for generations, and it stayed invisible until 2023. If a 9-meter finished hallway can hide in the most famous face of the most famous monument on Earth, right above the doorway, the honest conclusion is that our map of this pyramid was never complete. It was just the parts we happened to be able to walk into. The mainstream calls this another relief structure, another way to redistribute weight, maybe protecting the true entrance or an undiscovered chamber below it. And again, that is plausible. But listen to what one of the most famous Egyptologists alive, Zahi Hawass, said when the corridor was revealed. He said he believed there was something important underneath that corridor, an area, in his words, that is empty, not solid stone. Empty. The man who has spent his life defending the conventional story of the pyramids looked at that scan and said there is more down there we have not found. So now we have 2 hidden spaces confirmed inside the Great Pyramid in the span of 6 years, using technology that did not exist a generation ago. Both sealed, both deliberate, both discovered by machines rather than by any door the builders left behind. If you are keeping track, that is a monument we thought we understood, quietly revealing that it was built with secrets folded into its stone, on purpose, in places we were never meant to enter. And if the pyramid itself is hiding chambers this well, the ground beneath it is a far bigger problem, because that is where the third clue lives, and it is the one that actually goes down into the dark. If this is the kind of history that keeps you up at night, subscribe, because this channel goes into the sealed rooms of the ancient world every single week. Walk out of the Great Pyramid, cross the plateau toward the second pyramid, the one built for Khufu's son Khafre, and you reach the stone causeway that once connected the pyramid to the valley below. Somewhere along that causeway, cut straight down into the bedrock, is an opening most tourists never see. It is called the Osiris Shaft, and it is one of the strangest, least talked about structures in all of Egypt. The Greek historian Herodotus mentioned it more than 2,000 years ago. He described a hidden burial place on the plateau, surrounded by water, an island tomb reached through channels. For centuries, people read that passage and assumed he was exaggerating, mistranslating, or simply repeating a tall tale a local guide had told him. Herodotus collected a lot of stories, and not all of them held up. This one did. The shaft is real, and it matches what he described with unsettling accuracy. A tomb, deep in the plateau, surrounded by water. It drops in stages nearly 100 feet into the solid limestone of the Giza Plateau, through 3 separate levels, one carved beneath the other. And for most of modern history, nobody could reach the bottom, because the bottom was drowned. Groundwater seeped up through the rock and filled the lowest chamber, turning the deepest level into a flooded well. Local guides used to swim in it to cool off. Village children treated it as a watering hole. For a stretch of years, people on the plateau actually drew drinking water from it. Nobody knew, or seemed to care, what was standing in the dark beneath the surface they were swimming on. The most sacred ground in Egypt, and its deepest secret, was being used as a pool. It was not until 1999 that the archaeologist Zahi Hawass mounted a full excavation. Even then, the groundwater fought back. His team had to run constant pumps just to hold the water low enough to keep working, and the lowest chamber still flooded around them. What they found as they descended is genuinely eerie. Level 1, an empty chamber, just a stop on the way down. Level 2, 6 side rooms carved from the rock, holding figurines called ushabtis, pottery, beads, and sarcophagi. Two of them still containing human remains in poor condition. And then level 3, about 30 meters down, at the very bottom of the shaft, a large water-worn hall with a single stone sarcophagus standing in the middle, perfectly preserved, completely empty, a coffin at the bottom of a well with no body in it. Around that sarcophagus, ceramic fragments dating back to the 6th dynasty, roughly 2300 BCE. That detail matters more than it looks. It means the oldest datable material in the entire complex is at the very bottom, in the deepest, hardest, most flooded chamber to build. The Egyptians did not start shallow and work down over centuries. The deepest level is the oldest. Someone drove this shaft into the bedrock, through the water table, in the Old Kingdom, and then a symbolic empty tomb was placed at the bottom of it. Mainstream Egyptology reads the Osiris Shaft as exactly what its name suggests, a symbolic tomb. The plateau was known in ancient texts as the House of Osiris, Lord of the Underworld, and the shaft was likely a ritual recreation of the god's watery grave. Hawass himself found the hieroglyph for house carved into the floor beneath the sarcophagus lid. So the religious explanation is well supported. This is not fringe, this is the standard reading. But that explanation has a problem, and it is a problem of effort. To carve 3 levels of chambers, nearly 100 feet, straight down through solid bedrock, precisely, deliberately, into a zone you know will flood, is an astonishing amount of labor. Some researchers have looked at that shaft and asked a simple question. Would people with copper chisels and stone hammers really sink that kind of effort into a purely symbolic tomb, in a place they had to fight water to even build? And the erosion tells its own story. The first shaft, leading down to level 1, shows deep channels worn into the rock, an undulating surface where softer and harder limestone have weathered unevenly. That kind of erosion looks like water passed through it over a very long time. The same kind of weathering people point to on the walls around the Sphinx when they argue those monuments are far older than we think. There is a tunnel down there too. On the west wall of the shaft, the ancient builders cut a passage about 6 meters long. Hawass sent a boy through it on a rope to see where it went. It was sealed. It led nowhere they could reach. Just like the void. Just like the corridor. A deliberate passage cut into rock, ending at a wall. That is 3 clues now, and they all rhyme. A sealed void in the pyramid, a sealed corridor behind its face, a sealed tunnel at the bottom of a flooded shaft, each one built with intent, each one going somewhere we cannot follow. And in early 2005, a group of researchers claimed they knew exactly where all of it was leading. This is where the story either becomes the biggest discovery in the history of archaeology or the biggest overreach. And you need to see both, because the truth is hiding in the space between them. In March 2025, an Italian research team held a press conference in Italy that broke worldwide, led by Corrado Malonga of the University of Pisa and Filippo Biondi, linked to the University of Strathclyde. Along with the explorer Armando May, they announced that they had used satellite radar to see beneath the Khafre pyramid. And what they described was staggering. 8 enormous vertical shafts, each descending more than 640 meters into the earth, arranged in parallel rows, spiral pathways wrapping around them. 2 gigantic cubic chambers, each roughly 80 meters on a side. 5 multi-level structures connected by passageways. And they claimed this network extends beneath all 3 of the Great Pyramids. Not a tomb, a machine. An underground complex more than 2,000 feet deep, hidden under the most studied monuments on Earth. Some of their images, they said, showed vertical shafts. Others showed spiral pathways wrapping down around them. Some showed channels that looked, to them, like pipelines for moving water. A hidden world of geometry, more than 600 meters below the sand, far deeper than any known tomb, any known shaft, anything ever documented at Giza. The technique they used is called synthetic aperture radar tomography. In simple terms, they took satellite radar data along with the tiny vibrations in the ground, the constant micro movements caused by faint background seismic activity, and ran all of it through heavy mathematical modeling to reconstruct what they claim are structures far below the surface. And here is the part that keeps this from being pure internet fantasy. Their approach grows out of a peer-reviewed 2022 paper that used the same satellite radar method to infer the internal structure of the Great Pyramid of Khufu without ever setting foot inside it. The method has a real, published foundation in the scientific literature. That is exactly why the claim spread so fast and cut so deep. It was not just a man shouting into a camera. It had a paper behind it, a technology with a name, and 3 academics with university affiliations standing in front of 1,000 people. For a few weeks in the spring of 2025, it genuinely looked like the story of Giza was about to be rewritten from the ground up. And then came the wall of institutional resistance, exactly as it always does with Giza. Zahi Hawass, the single most powerful voice in Egyptian archaeology, did not hedge. He called the underground columns and structures beneath Khafre fabrications. He said the rumors had no basis in truth, no scientific evidence behind them, and that there was no mission working under that pyramid producing any such results. Other Egyptologists lined up behind him. The word they used over and over was unverified. And the frustrating thing is that they were not entirely wrong to say it. The team's full report, the one that would let other scientists actually check the math and the modeling, stayed unpublished while the story circled the globe. The press conference came first. The paper did not follow. Independent fact-checkers went through the claims and concluded there was no verified evidence to support them. And no one, on either side of the argument, did the one thing that would settle it. No drill went down, no excavation was opened, no independent field survey descended to confirm a single one of those 8 shafts. The most extraordinary claim made about Giza in a century, and the ground beneath it was never opened to test whether it was true. The claim and the counterclaim both floated in the air above sand that nobody was allowed to dig, which, if you have been paying attention to this whole story, is the most Giza outcome imaginable. A void we cannot enter, a corridor we can only film, a shaft we cannot follow. And now a supposed underground world, we are told, is either the discovery of the age or a mirage in the data, with no shovel permitted to decide. And yet the timing is what gnaws at people. The Osiris Shaft, confirmed and real, already proves the Egyptians dug deep vertical structures beneath the Khafre causeway, straight down through bedrock into the water. That is not speculation. That is excavated fact. So when a team says there are even deeper vertical shafts under that same pyramid, they are not inventing the category out of nothing. They are extending a pattern that genuinely exists at Giza, just to a scale nobody can currently verify. That is what makes it so hard to dismiss cleanly, and so easy to believe too much. So we arrive at the hard question. Does any of this prove there is a lost technology, a machine, an ancient power system buried under the pyramids? Almost certainly not. Not in the way the biggest version of the story wants it to be true. And you deserve the honest version, because the honest version is still remarkable. The 2025 Khafre claim leans on a method most radar specialists say cannot do what is being asked of it. Satellite radar does not take a clean X-ray of solid rock. Radar waves barely penetrate dense stone at all. What the technique really does is analyze faint motion signals and build a reconstruction through heavy mathematical processing. And the danger there is real and well understood. With enough processing, noise starts to look like structure. A weak, ambiguous signal can be shaped into something that appears precise and geometric when the underlying data simply cannot support that level of detail. 8 identical shafts descending exactly 648 meters is the kind of clean, repeating pattern that should make you cautious, not excited. Reality is rarely that tidy. Processing artifacts often are. The confirmed discoveries are a different matter entirely. The Big Void is real, published in Nature, seen by 3 independent teams. The North Face Corridor is real, confirmed by 3 separate technologies and photographed with a camera. The Osiris Shaft is real, excavated, documented, standing empty in the dark right now. None of those require aliens or lost machines. The most grounded reading is almost as impressive. The people who built these monuments were engineers of a caliber we still underestimate. They understood how to distribute unimaginable loads, so they built voids and relief structures into the stone. They understood the sacred geography of their own beliefs, so they carved shafts into the bedrock to reach the waters of the underworld. They hid spaces on purpose, sealed them with intention, and did it so well that the most advanced imaging technology on Earth is only now catching up to what they left behind. That is the real story. Not that gods or visitors installed a machine under the sand, but that a civilization 4,500 years ago built structures so sophisticated, so deliberate, and so full of concealed spaces that we are still discovering rooms inside monuments we thought we had memorized. The mythology of the underworld, the House of Osiris, the sealed tunnels leading nowhere, may not be fantasy at all. It may be the ancient way of recording something practical. That beneath these pyramids lies a network of chambers and shafts, built for reasons we have only partly decoded, waiting under our feet the entire time. And here is what makes it impossible to close the file. Every confirmed discovery of the last decade was found by pointing new technology at old stone and watching it reveal something no one expected. The void. The corridor. Each one hidden, each one sealed, each one real. Which means the honest position is not that the mystery is solved. It is that we have barely started looking. The Big Void has never been entered. The corridor behind the Chevron leads to a space Hawass himself says is empty and unexplained. The tunnel at the bottom of the Osiris Shaft was sealed by hands that died 4,000 years ago. We can see these spaces. We can measure them. We still cannot get inside. So the next time someone tells you the Great Pyramid holds no more secrets, remember that in 2017, a beam of particles from outer space found a chamber the size of a plane that 2 centuries of scholars had walked past. Remember that the ground beneath these monuments has never been fully mapped, and that the people who built them were far better at hiding things than we are at finding them. The void is still sealed. The corridor is still empty. The shaft still drops into black water. No one has followed to the end. And somewhere beneath the oldest wonder on Earth, in a room we have detected but never touched, the answer is still waiting. If you want to see what else the ancient world buried and hoped we would never dig up, watch the next investigation on screen right now.